Aline was quiet, reserved, and content in her own world, a world filled with colors, paint, and canvas. Her studio was a small, cluttered room in an old apartment building on the edge of the city. The walls were lined with unfinished canvases, each one a glimpse into Aline's soul. Her paints, a mess of vibrant hues, were scattered across the floor like the aftermath of a storm. She loved this space, even though it wasn't much. It was her sanctuary. Aline had always been an introvert. She found solace in her art, speaking with her brush rather than words. As a child, her mother would often find her sitting in a corner, sketching pictures of the world around her. Her father, a hard-working man who didn't quite understand his daughter's quiet nature, often pushed her to speak more, to be more social. "You can't live your whole life in that corner, Aline," he'd say. But Aline never listened. The world of art was where she felt truly alive, and that's all that mattered. But not everyone in Chicago appreciated Aline's silence. She was often ridiculed at school for her quiet demeanor. Kids would whisper behind her back, calling her shy or weird. The worst was Derek, a boy from her high school who made it his personal mission to torment Aline. Derek was popular, athletic, and everything that Aline wasn't. He would often mock her, saying things like, "What's the point of drawing all those stupid pictures? You're never going to make it." Aline would try to ignore the cruel remarks, but they stung. Her art was her escape, and Derek's words made it harder to hold on to that safe space. She was often alone at lunch, sitting quietly at the back of the cafeteria, sketching in her notebook while everyone else socialized and laughed. But despite the teasing, Aline continued to paint. Her works were breathtaking, a mix of abstract swirls, intricate landscapes, and vivid portraits. Her talent was undeniable, but it wasn't something that anyone in her high school could see at the time. She often wondered if they ever would. The years passed, and Aline graduated from high school with a quiet sense of pride. She went on to attend the Art Institute of Chicago, where she honed her craft even further. While the students around her celebrated their victories, Aline remained humble. Her focus was always on the next canvas, the next stroke of the brush. She couldn't imagine a life without art, even if it meant staying out of the spotlight. As she grew older, Aline's reputation as an artist began to grow, though not in the way she had expected. Her work was displayed at small galleries across Chicago, but the city, for the most part, didn't understand her. Her paintings were too raw, too personal for the mainstream. But one night, after a particularly disappointing show at a local gallery, Aline received an email from a curator in New York. They had seen her work and believed she had something special. They wanted to showcase her art in a global exhibit. Aline couldn't believe it. The idea of having her art seen by the world felt surreal. Yet, despite the excitement, there was a part of her that felt anxious. She was still that quiet artist from Chicago, unsure of how the world would respond to her work. But she didn't have to worry for long. As the exhibit opened in New York, the crowds poured in, captivated by the beauty of Aline's paintings. The emotions they evoked, the depth they held, seemed to resonate with people. Critics wrote glowing reviews, calling her a new voice in the art world, a visionary artist whose work transcended boundaries. One night, after the exhibit had closed, Aline was standing alone in the gallery, reflecting on everything that had happened. It was then that she heard a familiar voice from behind her. Never thought I'd see the day when you're up here, getting praised like that." Aline turned, startled. It was Derek, the same boy who had ridiculed her all those years ago. Derek stood there, wearing a suit and holding a glass of wine, looking every bit the successful man. His smirk was gone, replaced by a hint of respect. Aline hesitated for a moment before responding. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see the exhibit," Derek replied, his voice surprisingly calm. "I didn't expect much, to be honest. But I was wrong. Your work is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." Aline didn't know how to respond. The years of teasing, the cruel jokes, all of it flooded back, and a rush of emotions surged through her. But she kept her composure, her voice steady. "Thanks, I guess." Derek looked down at the floor, a sense of guilt crossing his face. I was an idiot back then, Aline. I didn't understand. I see now that you've always had something special." Aline nodded slowly, still processing the unexpected turn of events. Derek, the same person who had once taunted her, was now acknowledging her talent. It was a surreal moment, but it didn't change the past. The years of bullying couldn't be erased with a simple compliment, no matter how genuine it seemed. "It's all right," Aline said quietly. "I don't need your approval. I've never needed anyone's approval." Derek seemed taken aback by her response, but nodded. "I get it. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I've been following your work for a while now. I just didn't know how to say this. But you've got something amazing. You're going to go far." Aline looked at Derek for a moment. She saw sincerity in his eyes, but she also saw the man she used to be, a woman who had once tried to break her. A woman who now stood in front of her, acknowledging her success, but not knowing how to make up for the past. "You don't have to make up for anything, Derek," Aline said, her voice gentle. "But you're right about one thing. I'm going to go far." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Derek standing in the gallery, humbled by the very person he had once tried to break. As Aline stepped out into the cool New York night, the city lights illuminated her path, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't the same quiet girl from Chicago anymore. She had found her voice, and her art would carry her further than any words ever could. The days following Aline's encounter with Derek were a whirlwind. Her art, once confined to small galleries and local shows, was now a topic of conversation in art circles worldwide. New York had been a turning point for her. The exhibit had sparked a wave of interest, and she was beginning to receive invitations to display her work in major cities: Paris, Tokyo, London. It was the kind of recognition every artist dreams of, but for Aline, it was bittersweet. She hadn't expected her art to be so well received. She had only painted because it was what she loved to do. As the buzz around her work grew, Aline found herself overwhelmed by the attention. At first, she hid in the quiet corners of her studio, only emerging when she had to speak to the press or attend meetings with curators. The questions they asked her were often the same. What inspired your paintings? Where do you see your art going in the future? But to Aline, those questions seemed like traps. How could she explain the inner workings of her soul? How could she describe the quiet, private world that existed in the space between her brush strokes? She wasn't ready to share that part of herself with the world. Not yet. But as the months passed, Aline grew accustomed to the limelight. even though she never truly embraced it. She still spent most of her time in her studio, creating new pieces and trying to find new ways to express herself. Her work became more complex, more personal. Her latest collection was an abstract exploration of loneliness and connection, of being seen and yet remaining invisible. It was a reflection of her own struggle with fame, a way for her to navigate the tension between her introverted nature and the public's demand for her presence. One evening, while Aline was preparing for her next exhibit in Paris, she received another email that caught her by surprise. It was from Derek. He had followed her progress from the New York exhibit, and now he was reaching out. "Aline," the email began, "I know I don't deserve a second chance to speak to you, but I wanted to let you know how much your art has impacted me. I have been following your work closely, and I finally understand the power it holds. It's not just paint on a canvas. It's a voice, a story. I've been so blind to that in the past, and I owe you an apology. I never understood what you were trying to say, but now I do." Aline stared at the email, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Derek's words were different now. There was no arrogance, no smugness, just sincerity. Aline had spent so many years trying to ignore his bullying, trying to push past the hurt. But now, as she read his apology, something shifted. She had always believed in the power of art to heal, to change perspectives. Could Derek's words be part of that healing process? She took a deep breath and replied, "Derek, thank you for your kind words. I've worked hard to create something meaningful, but I didn't expect it to have this kind of impact. I appreciate your apology, but honestly, I've already let it go. Art is about growth, and I'm glad to see that you've grown too." The reply was short, but it was enough. It was Aline's way of acknowledging Derek's growth without getting caught up in the past. She didn't need to dwell on the years of bullying. She had moved forward, and so had he. Aline's next exhibit in Paris was the most successful yet. The gallery was packed with critics, collectors, and curious art lovers. Aline was invited to speak about her work, but she declined. Instead, she chose to let her art speak for itself. She had prepared a new piece for the exhibition, a portrait of a woman standing alone on a bridge, gazing into the distance. The painting captured the essence of solitude, but also of strength and resilience. Aline felt a deep connection to it, as if the woman in the painting was a reflection of herself. As the night wore on, Aline found herself standing near her painting, watching the reactions of the visitors. Some were quiet, moved by the piece. Others engaged in hushed conversations about its meaning. One woman, an older art critic, approached Aline with a smile. "You've created something truly special here," the woman said, her voice warm. "This piece speaks of isolation, yes, but it also speaks of hope. There's a light in the woman's eyes. Do you see it? She's not lost. She's searching, yes, but she's also finding herself." Aline nodded, grateful for the woman's insight. It was exactly what she had intended, though she had never fully understood it until now. The idea that her art had the power to make others see things from a new perspective filled her with a quiet joy. The next morning, as Aline was packing to leave Paris, she received another message. This time, it was a photo. It was of Derek, standing in front of her painting at the exhibit. He had sent it with a simple note. "I finally get it." Aline smiled, feeling a sense of peace. Derek's apology, his journey toward understanding, both of them were part of her own journey. She had spent so many years trying to fit into a world that didn't understand her. But now, her art had reached beyond the walls of her studio, beyond the limitations of her introversion. It had connected with people, even with the one person who had once tried to break her. As she looked at the photo of Derek, she realized something important. People don't always change overnight, and they don't always have to. Growth isn't linear, and sometimes it takes a long time for someone to understand what they've done wrong. Derek may have been cruel in the past, but he had taken the time to learn, to apologize, and to appreciate the very thing he had once mocked. In that, Aline saw something worth celebrating. She wasn't just an artist anymore. She was someone who had the power to change hearts, to bridge gaps, and to bring healing to the broken pieces of her past. And in that moment, Aline knew that her art, her quiet voice, was enough. Months passed, and Aline's life became a delicate dance between the world that wanted her and the world she needed to create. Her exhibitions had brought her worldwide acclaim, but they also made her a target for expectations. People wanted more of Aline, more paintings, more interviews, more of the woman behind the art. Yet, as much as she appreciated the recognition, Aline found herself retreating more and more into the quiet sanctuary of her studio. The quiet was where she could breathe, where she could think, and where her soul felt free to paint without interruption. It was during one of these solitary days in her studio that Aline received a phone call that would change everything. She had been spending the afternoon working on a new piece, a bold and colorful abstract, a departure from her usual quiet landscapes and portraits, when her phone rang, its sharp tone breaking the silence. "Hello?" Aline answered, wiping her hands on a rag as she placed the phone to her ear. "Aline, it's Derek." The voice was familiar, but it sounded different this time, more sincere than the tone he had used in their previous conversations. Aline paused. She hadn't heard from Derek in weeks, not since the Paris exhibit. "What's going on, Derek?" There was a moment of hesitation before Derek spoke again. "I've been thinking about something for a while now. Something I need to tell you." Aline sat back in her chair, setting her brush down. "Go ahead." "I've been following your work, and it's inspired me more than I can put into words," Derek continued. "But it's not just about your art anymore, Aline. It's about you. The way you've carried yourself with such grace, the way you've handled everything that's come your way. It's made me realize that the person I used to be, the person I was in high school, I can't be that anymore." Aline felt a knot tighten in her chest, but she didn't interrupt. Derek's words were raw, unfiltered, and he wasn't rushing them this time. "I don't expect you to forgive me just because I've changed, Aline," Derek said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I've learned so much over the past few months, and I want to make it right. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, I want to help you." Aline sat in silence for a moment, letting his words wash over her. This was the apology she hadn't expected, but had secretly hoped for. Over the years, she had let go of the bitterness she had once carried, and now she felt something else, something lighter. But she wasn't sure what to do with it. Derek had hurt her, yes, but he had also taken the time to change, to reflect on his past mistakes. Could she forgive him? And if she did, what would it mean for her? "I appreciate your apology, Derek, Aline said finally, her voice steady. But forgiveness isn't something that can be rushed. I need time to process it. Derek seemed to understand. Of course, I get it. I just needed you to know that I don't take your silence for granted anymore. Aline felt a wave of gratitude for his understanding. She had spent so many years buried in her art, avoiding confrontation, avoiding the noise of the world. Derek, in his own way, had taught her that it was okay to face the noise, to confront the parts of her past that still haunted her. I'll be here, Derek, Aline said quietly, her heart lighter. And if you want to make things right, show me with your actions. That's all I need. The line went silent for a moment, and then Derek's voice came through, full of sincerity. I will, Aline. Thank you. I'll prove it. Aline didn't hear from Derek for several more weeks. She continued to focus on her art, her paintings becoming more expressive, more daring. She began to create works that reflected not just her inner world, but the world around her, the complexities of human connection, the weight of silence, the strength of vulnerability. Then, one day, as Aline was preparing for her biggest exhibit yet, a retrospective of her entire career, she received a letter. The letter was handwritten, the words carefully crafted, and as she read it, Aline felt something shift inside of her. The letter was from Derek. Dear Aline, I know this is a long shot, and I don't expect anything in return, but I wanted to tell you what I've been doing. I've taken your advice to heart. I've been volunteering at an art program for underprivileged youth in Chicago, helping kids who've been overlooked, like I once overlooked you. I'm using my resources to help them find their voices through art, just like you found yours. It's been life-changing, Aline. I've also been supporting smaller art galleries, ones that focus on emerging artists, to make sure that voices like yours, that don't always fit the mainstream mold, get heard. I don't know if any of this is what you wanted from me, but it's what I can do. It's the only way I know how to show you that I've changed. Thank you for the grace you've shown me. I won't let you down. Derek Aline folded the letter, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't expected. Derek had done more than apologize. He had acted. He wasn't just seeking forgiveness. He was making an effort to change the system that had once hurt her. She knew then that forgiveness didn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes it meant recognizing growth, acknowledging change, and allowing space for that transformation to flourish. Her upcoming exhibit was the culmination of her journey, and she was ready for it. It wasn't just about showcasing her art anymore. It was about showcasing herself, her strength, her vulnerability, her ability to rise above the pain of her past. The night of the exhibit arrived, and Aline stood in front of her newest piece, a canvas that captured the image of two figures reaching out to one another, their hands almost touching, but not quite. It was a symbol of connection, of all the moments that had brought her to this place of peace, and the moments yet to come. As the crowd gathered around the painting, Aline felt something stir within her. She wasn't just an artist anymore. She was a storyteller, a healer, and someone who had the power to make people see the world differently. Derek's apology had been the catalyst, but it was her strength that had carried her this far. And in that moment, Aline realized that silence wasn't weakness. It was a form of power, power to heal, to create, and to transform. She had found her voice through her art, and it was more powerful than any words could ever be. As the evening wore on, Derek appeared in the crowd, standing near the painting that had brought them together. He didn't say a word to Aline, but his presence was a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had both taken. And as the night ended, Aline smiled. The world had finally seen her, not just as a quiet artist, but as someone who had the power to change hearts, one brush stroke at a time. Thank you for watching.